I spent 100 days in Terraria Skyblock, and here's what happened. There's a few different Skyblock maps for Terraria at the moment, and even an official one coming in the next update. But for this video, I decided to go with the most downloaded one on the Steam Workshop, which is Terra. This map only has 3 islands outside of spawn, that each have the bare minimum loot needed to just barely be able to progress through the game. Meaning, you have to do some pretty odd things to actually get through the game and beat Moonlord, which is my goal for this playthrough. Oh, and before we start, please subscribe so that I can hit 100k. Once I hit that goal, Lofi will stop charging me to talk to him. Thanks. And now we can actually hop into the playthrough. Once I was in the world, I spawned on a floating island of dirt that had a solidifier, some water, and a chest with 2 lead bars in it. Looking at the map, I could see 3 pylons, meaning those were probably islands that had loot on them, so I was gonna need to venture out to all of them at some point. So first, I mined all of the extra dirt I could without losing the water, and then started making my way down to the desert pylon, which was easier said than done, since I had to move the water with me. Once I made it down to where the underground walls started appearing, I left the water there, and then kept on going left towards the desert pylon using the remaining blocks I had. The desert island had a ton of extra blocks I could use, a heart crystal, a chest with 12 jungle vine walls, the golem spawner, and a single block of lava, which was the perfect thing to use in a mob farm. So I first started making a long platform on the right side of the island, so enemies could spawn, made my little bunker under the lava, and started waiting while enemies jumped into my trap. The main thing I was looking to get out of this was a ton of gel and granite, so I could start making more blocks. But I actually ended up getting some other great drops as well, like the Bat, which was one of the best weapons I could have gotten out of the very few that are available to me at this point. I also ended up getting the general merchant to move into the farm, so I was able to buy an anvil, some potions, and a net to catch critters. At this point, I had more than enough extra blocks to start building a way down at my spawn, so I logged off and then got back on so I could go to my spawn, and started placing platforms going down all the way to a short platform that brings you to the desert island. Once I finished building that, I went back up to where my water was and started building what would be my main base, and then started building my way to the cave pylon, which ended up being the most important island in this world. The cave island ended up having 8 locked chests, was technically the dungeon, and also had a demon altar alongside a life crystal. But they were both stuck under jungle temple brick, locking me out of being able to use either of them until after getting into hard mode. So the first thing I did was build a platform going off of the island so enemies could spawn. And then, for whatever reason, I decided to have a shot at Skeletron, and just hoping that I would luck out. But I obviously ended up failing pretty quick into the fight. So I then decided to see what was under the dungeon island, and ended up finding a chest that had a fishing pole in it, which was gonna end up carrying me through this entire playthrough. After that, I used the jungle walls to make some seeds, then bought some bombs and turned them into dirt bombs, since they will give you back more dirt than it takes to make one, and finally turned those dirt blocks into mud using a pool I made by duplicating water. And once I finished doing all of that, I had enough supplies to start making a jungle farm. So I got started on building one, since it was gonna take a while for it to all grow in. Once I finished that, I then built a pool of water so I could start fishing, since that was the only way I could increase my max health. After fishing for a while though, I got bored, and decided to do something else I needed to do, which was go to the underworld and make an extremely long platform in it. Once I finished that though, the only thing left I could do was go back to fishing. So that's what I did. But I also built a lava farm beside it, so I could farm blocks while fishing. This is all I ended up doing for multiple days straight, while also taking breaks every now and then to build up my main base. But during this painfully long process, a blood moon randomly happened, which ended up killing my guide, which ended up being extremely lucky for me, since the arms dealer ended up moving in instead of the guide again. The arms dealer was selling the mini shark alongside some ammo, so I got it and decided to try beating Skeletron again. But halfway through the fight, Skeletron despawned for whatever reason, so painfully, I went back to fishing. During this, the traveling merchant spawned again, so I went over to see what he had to sell, and ended up selling almost everything I could spare to buy the companion cube pet. After that, I got back to fishing, since I still needed to get 2 more life crystals, and luckily got both of them after a few days of fishing. By that time, the clothier had respawned, So I went to try and beat Skeletron again, but just like with every boss in this playthrough, I was severely under-equipped for this fight. So I had to rely on jumping between his arms and going up a small hill I made. But that paid off, since this time I ended up beating him. After that, I went back up to the surface to build a new house so I could get the Dryad to spawn. And once she was there, I started buying and planting regular grass seeds and acorns so I could finally get some wood in this run. And then, once I was done with that, I went to the underworld to try and beat the Wall of Flesh. I thought the best way to try and get a voodoo demon was to make a small little box and wait until I saw one spawn, which ended up working super well. I also made a pool of lava to fish in, just in case I needed it in the future, but I never ended up using it. My first attempt on the Wall of Flesh resulted in me dying pretty fast, and then, once I respawned, the Eye of Cthulhu was there waiting for me, which ended up killing me again. My second and third attempts on the Wall of Flesh went a little bit better, but I still ended up dying again. But finally, on my fourth try, I finally beat it. Now that I was in hard mode, I needed mechanical boss spawners, biome keys, and ore. So I thought the best way to go about doing all of those at once is making a jungle farm, with a thing of water underneath it so I could fish while farming enemies. During this fishing period, I managed to get a Glommer pet, which is pretty cute, and a destroyer spawner, but not much else. So I decided to move on before I took up too much time here, and went to go make my Hallow biome. After buying a ton of seeds from the Dryad, doing some dirt bombs, and building out a good bit from my main base, I got to work on building my Hallow biome, which I made exactly like the surface jungle one, so I could farm enemies there easily as well. Here, I was looking for the same items I was looking for in the jungle farm, but I was also looking for the unicorn mount, since it will be extremely useful in the boss fights. And I ended up getting it after only 30 minutes of using the farm, which is pretty fast compared to other items in this playthrough. The night after that, I got lucky again, with me getting a Hallow key and a vampire frog staff while waiting out a blood moon. Once the blood moon was over though, I started setting up my floating box for the destroyer fight, and beat it easily later that night using the Nimbus rod. After this, I went back to the Hallow farm to hopefully get the other two mechanical boss spawners, which is when I got another destroyer summoner. And I ended up getting Skeletron Primes that night during a blood moon I started myself. The next night, I went and beat the destroyer again to get some more Hallow bars, made some leggings using those bars, and then got back to farming for the last mechanical boss summoner I need. But because the last mechanical boss spawner I needed just happens to be the easiest to craft, I decided to make another Hallow farm in the cavern layers, which allowed me to quickly get enough Souls of Light to craft the mechanical eye. So, after doing some building to pass time until the next night came around, I went ahead and beat the twins, with me also doing Skeletron Prime the next night. And now that I had all three of the mechanical bosses defeated, it was time to move on to Plantera. This boss would allow me to use biome keys on the locked chests near the dungeon, so I was really looking forward to getting it over with. But, like everything else in this playthrough, it wasn't easy. My tiny underground jungle farm didn't have any Plantera bulbs yet, so to pass the time, I started building more layers to it. And whenever I ran out of seeds, I'd just go back to the jungle farm and would fish until more plants grew. While I was waiting though, the Slime Rain event started, so I went ahead and beat King Slime. After that, the Traveling Merchant came, and I ended up getting a great weapon that deals 90 damage, and is one of the rarest items that the Traveling Merchant can sell, which is the Sergeant United Shield. I also did a little building, and made a safe way to drop down from spawn, but not too long after that, the Plantera bulb finally spawned in, so I started the fight. This fight wasn't too hard, just took a good bit of time since my health is still extremely low. Eventually though, I did beat it, so I was then able to finally open the Hallow biome chest, which gave me 2 lizard cells to spawn Golem. So I went straight to the lizard altar and spawned in Golem, which ended up being one of the easiest bosses so far in this playthrough. I got a couple of good weapons from him, but I sadly didn't get the one item I actually needed, which was the pick saw. This would have allowed us to break the lizard blocks so we could get the life crystal there, but without another way to spawn Golem, it seemed like that life crystal was going to be stuck there until after Moonlord. After this though, I went back to my main base and started preparing for Moonlord. The first thing I had to do was make a platform spanning all the way across the world so I could battle the pillars without falling. This also allowed me to check out the final island I've been putting off, but there wasn't much there other than a challenge to get certain items, so I went back. At this point, my gear wasn't good enough to take on the lunatic cultist, much less Moonlord, so I needed a way to get some stronger gear, which is where the Empress of Light comes in. If I could manage to beat the daytime version of the Empress of Light, then I'd be able to get a super strong summoner weapon, alongside some other nice loot. So, after waiting a bit to find a prismatic lacewing, I started the fight, and ended up dying pretty fast. And since I only had a few hours left in this playthrough, I decided to do a trick on it. I moved the stylist into the Hallow, and then bought over 1,000 beach balls to max out the projectile limit in the game, which means the Empress of Light won't be able to use most of her attacks. Once I had all the beach balls thrown, I waited until it was 5 AM, despawned my frog minion, and started the fight. Without projectiles, it was extremely easy, but it still took up a good bit of time, with me just barely beating it before it became nighttime. Besides getting the Terra Prisma from this, which it always drops, I also ended up getting a Savage Kaleidoscope that deals 200 damage, which is what I end up using for the rest of the game. After the Empress of Light, the next boss I needed to beat was the Lunatic Cultist, which ended up spawning in my underground fishing pool. Because my gear still wasn't good enough to go against them normally, my goal was to let my Terra Prisma do all the work, while I ran around healing with potions. But this just caused me to die twice. While waiting on the cultists to respawn for the third time though, an alien invasion started. So I went ahead and beat them, which got me a great mount, the UFO. With this mount, I was able to do the strategy I originally had on the cultist, and ended up beating him this time. Right after this though, the pillar spawned in, which is normal, but the vortex pillar popped up right near my spawn, so I needed to beat this one soon. My plan with the pillars was to just deal as much damage as I can, die, and then go back and repeat the process, while also using the rainbow gun on the pillar itself once its shield was down. The vortex pillar took a bit, but once I got done with that one, I went on to the Stardust Pillar, which ended up being one of the easiest ones. After those two, I went to the Nebula Pillar, where I ended up dying a lot, but I eventually beat it. And then I went and beat the final pillar using the same strategy. At this point, I didn't think I could take Moonlord on at all because of my player stats, but I didn't really have any other choice since he was already spawning in. So I just tried to let my Terra Prisma do most of the work like last time, but I ended up dying about halfway through, which was expected honestly. Even though I lost, I had enough fragments from the pillars to make a single Moonlord summoner, so I made that so I could try again, without having to beat the cultist and pillars again. Instead of immediately using it though, I decided to spend 1 hour fishing to see if I could get any more life crystals, but I ended up getting nothing, so it was just a waste of time. After that, I decided to go ahead and to try to spawn Moonlord again, and just hope for the best, since there wasn't anything else I could do gear-wise. This time, I made sure to be constantly using my potions, since I was pretty lazy with it during the last fight. And I also tried letting my summoner weapon do most of the work, while I focused on trying to dodge things, which luckily paid off, as this time I did beat Moonlord, beating the game just before the end of this playthrough on day 97. At this point, I still had 3 days left in the playthrough, but I didn't have anything that I could work towards and complete in 3 in-game days. So I just spent the last few days building and farming for a jungle key, which I still didn't end up getting. So this challenge ended with me only opening up 1 locked chest, beating 9 bosses, and only having a max life of 200. Just like most of my videos, I published the map I played on, so if you want to take a look at my world yourself, you can find it on the Steam Workshop by looking up the map I have on screen now. Or if you're on mobile, then you can find the world file in my Discord, which I have linked in the description. I'll also have the untouched map file in my Discord server, just in case any mobile users want to try playing this Skyblock map for themselves. And as a little bonus for the people that want a challenge harder than normal Skyblock, I made a Skyblock version of the Get Fixed Boys Secret Seed, which you can also find in my Discord server, or on the Steam Workshop. That wraps up this video. This video was a bit different and longer than my normal ones, so be sure to let me know what you think about me making this style of content, as I always read and listen to the comments I see. Thanks for sticking to the end. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. And as always, make sure to have a wonderful day.